Hello, viewers, and welcome to Reminiscences with Hajiya Indo Muhammad, sometimes known as Hajiya Indo Bakori. I think because she's from that town in southern Katsina, also because one of the highlights of her career was being the principal of Federal Government Girls College in Bakori. She was also the principal of Federal Government Girls College Zaria, and at one time commissioner in two ministries in Katsina. And she retired as a director in the Federal Ministry of Education in 2015. But she's still the chairperson of the Hassan Usman Katsina Polytechnic in Katsina. So Hajiya, I'd like to welcome you to our program and to start by asking about your earlier days, your schooling. In those days, I think being a girl child, getting an education is a bit challenging. How did you overcome that difficulty?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you very much for granting me the opportunity to interact in this way. Like you said, I'm from Bakuri in Katsina province in those days. And talking about girl child education, I would always say that I'm a living proof of God's destiny, miracle if you like. But it's really when God has destined something for you, nothing and nobody can take it from you. I was willingly enrolled in primary school by my father in 1961. But beyond the primary school level, in those days, it was a very rare event. So from the beginning, my father was satisfied that I could have primary education, but no more than that. So I was enrolled in a nearby primary school very close to my house, an old one. It's still there, the Nadabo Primary School in Bakori. Fortunately for me, with all sense of modesty, I would say I was relatively brilliant. So I was doing well. But my father had set his eyes only on the completion of primary 7 and no more.
Did you have sisters who went through the same thing?
This is the problem. The sister before me, my father had a lot of children, but they were largely male. The sister that I follow, or the one before me, it's like was 9 years older than me, but she wasn't enrolled even in the primary school. In those days, if the white men or the authorities wanted the influential people in society to give children, I think some of them opted to give children that were not biologically theirs. Somehow everybody had some of those in their household. So when it was time to enroll, and my father was probably asked to pledge one, he gave out my aunt, who was still living with my mom. And so she attended primary school, but my sister was the privileged one, so she wasn't enrolled. So 9 years after, I was the only one around, and I think that was why I was giving out. So during my primary education, I think those people must have been inspectors of some kind. They used to come around the school, and I think they were keeping a record of some kind of continuous assessment record. I don't really know where they were coming from, maybe from Kaduna or wherever the headquarters was.
Were they white men?
They were white people, I know, I remember. They would come, look around the school, check on probably records of students, and go. In primary 5, I think, or 6, I had a headmaster who was very, very interested in me going beyond the primary school. can't remember whether he came while we were in primary 5 or left in primary 6. And that was Alhaji Abdul Qadir Funtua. He's still alive. I owe much of the enthusiasm and the encouragement to go beyond primary school to him. So he was very keen on getting me to move because of his assessment that I was relatively brilliant. Unfortunately for me, at the end of primary 6, he was transferred. So in primary 7, when we were to take the common entrance into schools, the then schools were large, only the WTC in Katsina and then the Government Girls College in Dala, Kano. So exam time came, and I recall an incident. My father summoned the headmaster and ordered him he should make sure that I failed the exam. I would always tell people that some of what we complain about now had always been in place even in those years. So on the day of the exam, we were all in one hall. For some reason, the headmaster was able to get into the exam room. And I don't know, maybe the inspector, the people conducting the exam gave him some little latitude. He came in, and while he went around some of the students, probably helping them, his duty when he stood before me was to make sure that my answers were wrong. So for the period he stood, I made sure the answers I was shading were wrong. But fortunately for me, he wasn't allowed to stay too long. He had to leave. And when he left, it's what still surprises me, because I wasn't a rebellious child. I was not too keen as such on going to school. And I know I didn't set out deliberately to just defy my father, but there was this feeling of, how could I allow this paper to go out with wrong answers? That was, I felt no. So very unlike me, I took my cleaner, cleaned off the wrong answers because it was pencil, and then I shaded the right ones. So the scripts went, and results came. I had passed. I think it took the headmaster some time to be able to tell my father that I was on the list of those that were supposed to attend an interview. Finally, he summoned the courage and now convinced him that I would probably fail at the interview level. So my father accepted that, and we went to Funtua for the interview. Spent a couple of days waiting for the interview to take place. And I don't even know what miracle the headmaster thought he could work with the interview, because it was even oral. Some of those white people were there. So I took the interview. I suppose I did very well. There was this school that I had never heard of. That was the Queen Elizabeth School.
Queen's College
in Ilorin. They were the initial unity colleges that were modeled. The one in Ilorin was the one for the northern states. Then there was the King's College in Lagos, and the King's for the boys. The King's for the boys, Queen's for the girls. But the one in Ilorin was supposed to cater for girls in the northern states. And I don't know, I think the criteria was to pick the best around on a flat kind of basis. And then, of course, some had the privilege of being maybe cabinet members' children. So I was apparently selected. So my admission letter came.
To Ilorin?
From Bakuri. And the headmaster did not know how to approach my father with it. So meanwhile, there was somebody whose child was 1 year behind me in the primary school. And he wanted his child to go to school because he was educated. So he was set for the girl to move. I think the headmaster wanted to play a fast one now. He felt if my father didn't want it and somebody else wanted it, so no harm, maybe if it was juggled. Because the letter was lying around for some days. I remember visiting this particular family where this lady this young girl was 1 year behind me. And as I was leaving, she escorted me to the doorstep. And she now told me, did you hear something? I said, what? She said that somebody in this town was admitted to Ilorin. I said, Ilorin in school?
So you didn't know up to that point?
We didn't know. My father didn't. I didn't know either. But I recall the girl escorted me because I had been sent to her mom. So I said, do you hear something? What? Somebody in this town has been admitted to a school in Ilorin. And I remember the phrase I used in Hausa then. I said, why? Tabani. You know, because I never associated it with me. And I went home. This was in the evening. Meanwhile, a cousin of my mother's had seen the headmaster coming to the office where he was and negotiating for this swap, as it were. And he got angry that, why should I earn something? And then my father was there sitting and someone was trying to trade it off. So the next morning when he was going to work, he stopped over at our house. He was a cousin to my mom, still alive. I reminded him of this just about 2-3 months ago. And he said he wanted, after greeting my mom, he said he wanted to see my dad. When he saw him, he said, Hajiya, why should you allow this? That your child is brilliant. How can she get admission to such a good school? And then you come and say because you don't want, somebody is trying to negotiate it off to someone else. And I still say, if the person who had the letter had come up front and told my father, look, there's nothing I can do anymore. She has been offered admission, but this other person wants it. We can work it in such a way that his child can replace yours. I was positive my father would have accepted. But this notion of somebody going behind his back to trade it off, my mom's cousin now used that to incite him. And he said, okay, no problem. After all, let her come and go. In those days, I couldn't leave my mom for 4 days. I couldn't. Anywhere I went, it was holiday time. Even when I went to my favorite aunt, I would spend a day. By the second day, I would start imagining all sorts of things that had happened to my mom. And I would cry and come back home.
How old were you at that point when you finished?
That was like, I was 12 when I finished primary school. I went in at 5, 6, then like 12. But before that, at 10, 11, I couldn't leave my mom for a week. Because there was a day I went to visit my auntie who was in a remote place, Musa. There were no motorable routes then.
Yeah.
And I cried and cried after 2 or 3 days. So her father-in-law had to raise his truck. Because in those days, there were no cars. There were only trucks who used to come to Funtua on Mondays and Thursdays for the market days. He had to ask the driver to bring the truck and bring me home. And when they brought me, my auntie started crying. So she too had to be brought the next day. So when my father recalled this incident, he now said, come and go to the school, mother serves you right. That was the motivation to send me off to school. That if anything, at least let me even get away from my mom. So this is what I call.
So how did you go to Ilorin and how did you adapt to Ilorin?
That's another interesting thing because as soon as that person left, my father sent for the headmaster and told him, look, I learned Indo has been giving admission. Produce the letter. So the man couldn't do anything. He brought out the letter. We went to the only shop in town to buy the provisions listed in the letter. But between our family house and the shop, we got the items, all the attachments, then the letter was said to have gotten lost. So we had provisions lined up, but no letter. Came, but we couldn't find the letter. Then my father said, no problem. You take her, deliver her to the school, and tell them that you've lost the letter. Believe me, that was how
So the headmaster had to take you to Ilorin.
He had to,
himself.
yes. That's my father was that authoritative. So Since you lost the letter, no problem, take her. And
So he took you to Ilorin and left you there?
He drove, we were on a trailer for 2 days.
2 days
Traveling from Funtua. It took 2 days from Funtua to Ilorin. We left in the evening of a Monday, I think, from Funtua. Spent the whole of Tuesday and then the morning of Wednesday before we arrived in Ilorin. And when we arrived, the school was then manned by white people. So truly he told them the letter was lost, but I was also person. And they accepted.
Because the record will show that you were the same
But,
person.
you can imagine if it was in these days. I was accepted and sent to the boarding house. So that was how my life in Queen Elizabeth School
So was it traumatic?
started.
You
Not
haven't left
at
home?
all. Well, I think mixing with children of our age, our classmates were all there. Somehow I think it turned out better than even I feared it would. I didn't cry much. Didn't know. I was so settled, and the environment was good. The atmosphere was conducive.
Were family members visiting you?
Not at all. This is what I would always tell people. Never. There were visiting days at the end of every month. But those of us from the north, we didn't bank on visitors coming because nobody would travel from the north down to Ilorin to visit. So I didn't know the pleasure of having visitors on visiting day. But we didn't seem to care. And returning home for the holiday was another adventure altogether. The railway then, there were 2 trains, one coming to Kano, the other going to Jos. So all those of us who were heading towards the north, from Mina up to Kaduna, Kano, and Zaria, a coach would be reserved for us from Lagos. It would be labeled specifically for QES girls, so nobody was allowed to enter the coach. On getting to Ilorin, only our students would board that coach. At different points, people came off and went home for holiday. The same arrangement was made for those going towards Jos, because we used to have Kano Limited and Jos Limited, Plateau Limited, I think. So
from Kano you have to take transport to...
No, I used to drop off at Zaria.
Zaria, it's closer.
And my father would send somebody to the train station to pick me and would go home. So that was the routine. On return, arrangements were made by parents, and then we all boarded the train back to Ilorin. Very soon we got used to getting down at Ilorin and taking a taxi to school. So it was that smooth.
You made grade 1 when you finished your school. I mean, that suggested that you still have more potential. Is it difficult for you to be allowed to go to university at that point?
That was another hassle. But one other thing that I still thank God for, and I have a firm belief in, is that environment counts a lot. If people are given the opportunity, there's no limit to anyone. When I left Bakuri and got to Ilorin, my classmates were largely, there were those of us who came on, this quota kind of thing. Even from rural backgrounds like mine, that was the justice of those days. You had a chance once you were good. I wish we could bring that back. Then some of the students were, like I said, from the premier's own environment.
Children of ministers, top officials.
Yes, these were the kinds that we are friends with. And so I recall the first exam we had. I had a teacher who was then on, after HSC, people would go and teach for a short while before going to the university. I wouldn't want to mention names, but he came to be a minister later, I remember. But he was then an HSC teacher. And he was teaching mathematics. So, mathematics isn't a very good subject with girls. For the first term, there was no exam in the first term. In the second term, he gave us tests. And sometimes he would say, some of the girls from Kaduna finished from capital school.
The elite girls.
Very good. Would say, no, shut up. Only capital school girls would know this, something like that. But with the final scores in the second term, I took the 8th position. Eighth. Even coming from where I was coming. But believe me, that was the lowest position I ever took. We soon leveled up. The third term, I think I took the 3rd position. And thereafter, it became like that. So the only thing I can attribute it to is this leveling environment. If you have the potential, if it's exposed and you are given the opportunity, there is no limit to. I just pray, I hope we can bring back that culture.
So what happened when you finished with grade 1? Let me still go back to that question.
Before then, my father had already worked out who I was going to marry anyway.
Okay.
So before we finished, the School of Basic Studies had come on stream by then.
Right.
The first intake had gone in, and we were supposed to be the second. I saw some of my classmates apply. I don't know what led me. I said, let me too try. So I applied. Then we were called for interview. We left Ilorin to attend the interview in Zaria. Came around. Again, I think I did well. We did well.
Yeah.
We all passed. But for whatever reason, this time my mother was very staunchly against the person I was supposed to marry. So you know what it is like, isn't it, when a mother doesn't support any marriage? Somehow, for whatever reason, my father could not have his way.
Was he a relative, the person?
Not really, no, not really. He wasn't a relative, but my mother would just not hear of it. So that kind of liberated me. And my father decided to just let me be. So I started the School of Basic Studies along with some of my mates. So after that, then it became another transition to the university course.
Right.
Because we finished, and I think virtually all of us transited into the degree program. So that was...
Yes. So at what point then did you fulfill your family's wish for you to marry? Were you still a student?
I was still a student, yes. I was still a student in my second year in the university. I now met the person that I thought, and by then my father had given up. It was like, do as you wish.
So this was your choice.
This was someone. Yes, this was someone. No, not at all. No, we're not even from the same town or the same environment. So I got married in my second year in the university, and then my husband was then on course in the UK for his master's. So it was when he eventually came back in my final year that I would say I got properly settled as a full-time housewife, as it were. Fortunately, I had virtually finished the 300 level course, which was the final year level. So now went into the NYSC, during which time I had this one, who was my first daughter, Zainab. So after the NYSC, it was all smooth. You finished NYSC, a job was waiting for you. I think the more curious thing was at the university. I don't know if it ever occurred to us that you could do something other than teaching.
So you thought
these other varied jobs were not,
that was it for you? You're a housewife, you have a young family.
I voluntarily, in fact, my brother used to mock me. Said, look, Indo, you went into teaching, you should have taken something. They call it more challenging, as it were. But I chose to be a teacher. And one curious thing was, I think I initially registered. We were to take courses. I had French, English, and then education by the side.
Right.
So I was to major in French, and I was very good in it. So, like I said, in those days, if you were the best at 200 level, part 2 we used to call it, you would be required to go abroad and spend an extra year just on the French attachment.
Yes.
So by the time we came back, your mates would be in 300 level. You would be required to go back to that 200 level for other courses which you missed.
Well, are you influenced by the fact that you are married now, or maybe your husband? There's an issue.
It was after, it was supposed to be after the first year. Then in that second year, I ought not to have even been around. I would have been in France. In which case, maybe I wouldn't have met my husband. I would not have thought of things like that.
Yeah.
But I just didn't like the idea of another year.
You are not tempted by Paris and all this?
In fact, that was all the more reason why I became scared, Yes. I wasn't. So I now decided, no, I would switch over to make education my main subject, and now not even take French as a main teaching subject. I was ready to make English my main teacher. I think my French teacher, I was very disappointed. But
I noticed that also in your career path, you, I guess, had to follow where your husband was moving from Kauran Namoda, later on to Lagos, to Warri.
That is it. It wasn't much of a career as such, and this is where the choice comes. It's either you have a family and you just try to adapt yourself around the family and the job, or
you can't have it both.
That is it. Yes, I was at the Kaduna Polytechnic.
Because your husband was there.
He was there. Then he left. I went to Lagos. It was a very interesting job. But within a year of my being in Lagos, my husband now was posted to the Warri office of African Petroleum. And so the need to move again came up.
You have to move to Warri.
I had to move to Warri. And even though I was enjoying my job at the BEA, and I had to leave it, and the only Federal Ministry of Education establishment in Warri was the Federal Government College, Warri. So I had to become a teacher again.
Back to teaching.
Back to teaching.
How was Warri? How was it adjusting to Warri?
Yes, it was one of the most difficult periods of my life, I should say. The year we moved to Warri, I lost my father. And that affected me tremendously. And then for whatever reason, I think I was not as comfortable with Warri as I was with Lagos. I still like Kano. Right. I always say if I was a man, probably I should have settled in Kano. Like Kano. It was home. I had lots of relatives, and the school itself was good. There were lots of activities and so on.
This is Federal Government College, Kano?
Kano, yes. So I was there for about 3 years. Then again, I would emphasize this in all areas at critical moments of my life. It is only God that has come in with whatever good I have received. From nowhere, I had traveled to, I had my baby. This girl you were saying has had a baby.
Right.
I had her, so I was on maternity leave. My husband had to go out to Yola from Kano on assignment. I said, okay, I had never been to Yola. Maybe I should. I went with him just to see what it was like. I was there. I would call the children back home to find out how they were doing. On one of the mornings when I called, they now told me that so person had come from Katsina and said I was required to send a CV at that time. To send a CV, he mentioned the person I was to give the CV to. So it was in the days of this landline. There was no cellular phone at that time. So while my husband was standing, I was holding the phone and I was like, CB. I was asking the young lady, ma, CB. And I put the phone down. My husband said, maybe they mean CV. So I didn't know. I had never written one before that.
Yeah.
So about 2 days later, we came back to Kano. Another messenger came and said, so person, that was when it was clearly stated that so person said I was required to submit my CV in Katsina. And I was to take it to, he mentioned the person's name. As at that time, I think I had been to Katsina only twice in my life. I always told people that I knew Wari, I knew Port Harcourt because
Lagos.
while down there, I knew Lagos.
But not Katsina.
Not Katsina.
Yeah, capital.
Not Katsina. No. So I quickly hustled up the CV. I don't know what it was for. Cuddled my baby and took a drive to Katsina. The person had said this was where his house was. When we got there, we waited for him to come from the office. When he came, he now said to Hajiya, come, let's go. The governor asked me to call you. I don't know what it is for.
So the military governor
The military governor there.
Was it Yahya Madaki?
No, Onoja.
Onoja.
It was Lawrence Onoja, yes. We got to the government house. We sat on a chair. The governor came in. Apparently, had been playing lawn tennis. When he came, he just engaged me in a conversation. Okay, Hajiya, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. Nobody said anything about a job. Nobody said anything about whether you want to do it or you don't want to do it. Okay, after he said, it's okay, Hajiya, I'm just meeting the indigents of the state. It's good to meet you. So I got up, I came out perplexed. And even the person who took me did not say.
You thought there would be some definitive discussion.
Yeah, this is it. This is what I want to give you. You want to do it?
Think
You
about
don't want to do it?
Yes.
Nobody said anything.
So
It's
the next thing you
critical
had
now.
your name being announced is the usual.
We drove back to Kano. Got back in the night. This was a Wednesday, I remember. Thursday afternoon passed. On Friday, my niece, who was then living with me, had a friend who was in Katsina. And the friend now just called her over the phone. Look what they are announcing Mama's name as one of the commissioners in Katsina. You know? So when I look at that and I see the issue of you want a job, you lobby this, you lobby that, you ask for it. Every good thing that has come my way has literally fallen.
Now, was that challenging for you and your family setup now? Here you are now, commissioner in Katsina.
Okay. As fate would have it, barely a couple of months after I left Kano, I initially kept the children. My husband said I should leave the family behind. He was supportive. I came to Katsina, took up the commissioner job. The family was still there. But about 2-3 months after, he was recalled to Lagos. So he had to leave for Lagos to the head office. So then he accepted that the children and everyone could move to me in Katsina. So we now came to settle while he was there in Lagos. So that was how, again, we operated between Lagos and this time Katsina. Then,
How was it being a commissioner? Fairly young age, I would say.
That is it.
Your health commissioner and then youth and social welfare. Yes.
This is why I say experience and knowledge of the civil service is truly important. I had no idea of how a file was treated in those days because I was just a classroom teacher. And if you were a teacher, you didn't even know what a minute was. You didn't know any of this. I didn't have the faintest idea of these things. So it was not easy. It was not easy. Naturally, you know, by the age, by your being a woman, and then some of these senior civil servants and so on, it was
But why
rough.
do you think you were appointed?
I honestly, this is what I was told later. There was a classmate of mine who was in the cabinet, and he was close to the governor. He and the other person who called me, who had known my husband. I learned the governor said he had 2 female members of cabinet, one from the Daura zone, the other from Katsina zone. And both of them were exiting the cabinet. So the governor now said he wished he had someone from the southern part of Katsina, a woman, that he could not appoint. So this classmate of mine was like, oh, I don't know where Indo is now. Because I know, as I said, we were mates. I don't know where Indo is now because she's from southern Katsina. I think my basic qualification was the geographical location I was coming from. You know.
Well, you spent 3 years or so in 2 different ministries. So you must
Yes.
have adopted
I
other
had
people.
health was something else, not Ministry of Health. I don't know. There was a doctor with me on the cabinet, and ironically, at the last minute, the governor said I think he had intended to send me to education and send her to health. But I don't know what it is, something was brewing, whatever. So at the last minute, he decided to swap portfolios for us.
Yes.
Perhaps in his belief that once you were a commissioner, you could man any ministry. So that was how the doctor now went to education. And the educationist, supposed educationist, went to health. It was not easy. Not easy. So a few months after, Onoja himself was redeployed. Then Madaki came in. Well, naturally, all the things that go on.
Yes.
Some
Changes.
there were changes, there were reshufflements, there were whatever, droppings here and there, until finally he now felt I should move to the Ministry of Social Development. So
Youth and sports.
Youth and sports.
So are you more comfortable there?
No, not maybe the social development aspect of it.
But no youth and sports.
But then the governor, was being a military person, naturally was interested in sports. So sports tended to dominate the activities of the ministry. We did what we could. And
people say political appointments, the challenge is the pressure they bring on you. Relatives, friends, everybody wanting contracts and jobs.
Honestly, I think it's probably later day.
Okay.
These are all part of the things we have come to load ourselves with. I think in those days, people really were not that bothered. It's now that everybody sees a political office or any office at all as a means of my person is there, I should get something.
After the commissionership, you went to a string of other assignments back to Kaduna Polytechnic, and then in another college in Kauranamoda, where you were in the registry. But this was more or less following in the footsteps of your husband.
Yes, after the commissionership, actually, I think the first, I had to report back to the ministry.
Right.
And by then, I was posted to the office of the Director General, the Hajiya.
This was in Lagos?
In Lagos.
So you went back to Lagos?
I went on and off to the office of Hajiya, as he was called the coordinating director of education. But my husband was now applied and became appointed as the rector of the Federal Polytechnic in Kauranamoda. I recall I was appointed to the Federal Government Girls College, Kazauri then. Kazauri it was. But then this family issue came up.
Because your husband
was I going to go to Kazauri? My husband in Kauranamoda. And then he had insisted that the children should be stabilized in a good school in Zaria, which we could not guarantee in either Kauranamoda or Kazauri. So I felt it was like tearing the family in too many fragments. I had to honorably apologize and turn down the appointment to Kazauri. I chose to go to Kauranamoda so that at least we settle the children in Zaria. And, it was like just the two-way now between Kaura and Zaria. I was there for like 2-3 years. I came to have a baby. And the pressure of taking a baby to Kauranamoda now made me think of maybe I could run a second degree. So I got interested in international relations, imagining if ever, if there was any service, if I was a man that I would have wanted to be in, it's the foreign service. So
why foreign service? You like traveling?
Yeah, I like traveling. And I really felt it's something that I would have loved to do. So I decided to undergo that course, even though I had already gotten a master's some 7 or 8 years back, a master's in education. So I enrolled for the master's in international relations at Ahmadu Bello University, and took the course. But then before its expiration, the FGGC Bakuri became vacant. Hajiya Hindi had to move to become an INEC commissioner. By then, the policy was established that the states themselves would nominate whoever would come to head their institutions. So I recall, again, contact was made to me from the state government. Somebody was sent to say if I was interested, I should bring my CV. But I really wasn't. So I turned down the request and said maybe another person should be sourced. Some other person again came from the ministry and tried to convince me to apply to go to Bakori. And again, I told him no, I was okay. So it was now a delegation that met my eldest brother, because we had lost our father, so he was the head of the family. They went over to him and said they learned that contact had been made to me to take up this Bakori job, and that I had said no. But they felt it was something I could do for the community. You know, everybody feels ours, that's. So this was a group of people from Funtua Bakori. So my eldest brother came over to discuss with us, my husband and I. And that was when we felt it would be disrespectful to continue to say no. I emphasize this notion of not really having to go and lobby for something. You know, whatever is destined to be yours, it's likely to be yours. So
at this point, your husband was the rector
in Gaurana
yes. And you are the principal in Bakori. Now,
that was what it came to be.
So the separation has happened.
So was still there, but at least I could keep in touch with the children in Zaria. The problem was the children were based in Zaria.
Yes.
So for me to go so far away, like Kazaure or Lagos, while they were in Zaria and he was far away in Gaurana, it was better. The Zaria was at least close to Bakori.
Will you say this tenure of yours in Federal Government Girls College Bakori is the highlight of your career in the...
Yes.
Because a lot has been written about it.
The most glorifying... I still tell people that I believe some even exaggerate whatever they think I have done. But if there's any other lesson in that, I think Islamically, it's said that people who ask for position should not be given. I tend to believe that. Maybe it is best for those who haven't asked for it to be convinced to take it up. Because if you ask for it, maybe you know what is in it. Because you know what probably know what you are after. But in all honesty, I accepted to go simply to fulfill that need that the people felt I could help fill. And at the back of my mind was my experience with Queen Elizabeth School, Ilorin. It remains up till today the best picture of a good secondary school, a good girls' secondary school. If you did anything, there was no corporal punishment. Nobody beat you up. Not teachers, not to talk of students. You could be asked to kneel down. You could be made to sweep the floor. You could be asked to wash the toilet as punishment if you did wrong. And by the time you did anything that would warrant you standing out to be caned, it was a whole ceremony for you to be caned. And the canes would go on the legs, at the back of the legs. So beating was out of it. Yet I discovered that with all sense of modesty, I would say people from that school are relatively disciplined people. Those of us who graduated from there, there's this sense of wanting to do the right thing. We are humans, but at least wanting to do the right thing. So I owe a lot that is in my life to my experience in that school.
And you say this is what you
So,
did for
so
Bakori.
when Bakori came, it was like, okay, this is an opportunity to test and see whether we could also implant those things. It's up to the students of Bakori to say whether, but I would say we probably succeeded in doing some of it.
Many of them say so. I have read testimonies.
Yes. So it was a pleasant experience. And with cooperation, if anything, it has taught me that there is really nothing like tribalism or religious divides in themselves. These feelings are engendered or are encouraged by the attitudes of those who hold the reins of power. This I would always say. Every human being knows what justice is. Everyone knows what equity, relative equity is. And I found that some of the most hardworking people, some of the people who loved me most were Southerners. They still are.
How do you compare your experience in the girls' college in Bakori with the one in Zaria? Because later on you also became a principal.
I moved to Zaria, for, I would say home, because all my children who were female were students of HPGC Zaria. Even when I was in Bakuri, none of them enrolled in Bakuri. So when the transition came to Zaria, Zaria people were waiting for me to come. Came, we picked up and tried to inject the same kind of attitude. This person I'm talking about, the one from Cross River, I met in Zaria. Just last Saturday, I was at a speech and prize giving day. Because the school is now headed by one of my former staff. He was the pillar of my academic work. I had an academic affairs committee, and he was chairing it, Mr. Magaji. But he took the ethos, this our approach to work, wherever he went. So he did. He's at the Federal Government Boys College in Garki here.
Hajiya, you've been retired now since 2015.
Yes.
Do you think you retired too early, or are you happy to have retired at that point?
I retired having attained my mandatory age of 60 years. So I exited the service, and I'm retired. We often say retired but not tired.
Yes.
Not too tired, slightly tired. Yes. So Alhamdulillah, I've retired in good health. I still have a few things that engage me. The former governor of Katsina State, Alhaji Aminu Bello Masari, immediately after my exit from the service, co-opted me into one thing or the other. So finally, I was like back home.
You are the chairperson of the Hassan Usman Katsina
Polytechnic currently, yes.
Thing? You now go to Katsina, you are forced to go to Katsina more often?
I'm not, it's not a force as it were. It's not being forced. And we have quarterly meetings. And fortunately now, because of the means of communication, emails, WhatsApp and so on, we're able to address. But these are not, the job is not a day-to-day management kind of thing. We maintain supervisory look. So we let the management do what they need to do. We keep an eye that at least the desire is to raise the standards higher.
You lost your husband.
I did.
So how is family life for you now? Is only the kids are grown up?
All the kids are grown. My youngest son is already a worker himself. He works at them. I have nobody around me. Unfortunately, 4 of them are in Abuja. The other 2 in Kaduna. Alhamdulillah, God has been kind to me. I have also varied. My first daughter Zainab is an accountant. I have an engineer, my son. I have a medical doctor. She is the one in Kaduna. I have an administrator someone who took after me. I read English. I have a lawyer, was the one that had the baby. And then my youngest son is a builder.
Builder.
He is a builder, yes, he's a builder. So Alhamdulillah.
So family
there
life
was
now consists of you moving from
one thing to the other, as it were. I'm
Yes.
all alone now in
Yes.
Zaria, but there's always something that somebody needs among them. So in between my small official commitments, then attending to them.
Yeah. But how is your daily life now? Now that you are all by yourself and retired, how is your typical daily life?
My typical daily. The thing is, I try to maintain an open house even where I am. So I'm never short of visitors. I wake up in the morning, do my normal prayers, recitations, and there's always one thing or the other to attend to. If I have visitors, socialize with them, attend to people, go out on visits, the sick people, to weddings, the normal thing as it were. Read on my own for an hour or two, read Islamic books and so on.
Do you have any hobbies, any things you do for pleasure?
I should learn to exercise. That's the one thing I haven't done much of that I should do.
Yes.
But I knit.
Knit.
You know, yes,
Knitting.
I knit, I crochet, handcraft.
Right.
I do. I haven't had the time to,
Right.
as it were, but I can do them,
Right.
and I would. I now with the relative abundance of time, I take lessons from the Malam that comes to that, but I'm thinking of enrolling in a formal Islamic school. My worry is if I go and enroll in a school that requires me to come Monday to Friday or Monday to Wednesday and then Saturday to Sunday, because of my frequent travels, I would break the chain. But I think have a Malam that comes to the house. I take lessons from him.
Do you have a chance to travel abroad? You wanted to be an ambassador, but
Yes, I had the hobby of my annual Umrah trips a few times. It's just the things have become so expensive now. Occasional trips to the UK, because that's where I lived at a point in time. If we didn't come for my master's program, I was out in Britain for 2 years. So it's always a good place to go back to. It's like going back home. And the Umrah trips, they were regular until things became difficult. We used to observe those last 10 days of Ramadan. But then accommodation became more expensive. The whole place became more congested. And Umrah gradually became like Hajj. So we now switched over to the off-peak period of Umrah. And so I go to Saudi Arabia weekly every year, try to. The occasional London trip I do. What I have not been able to do is the visiting African countries. I promised someone I would go to Niger, ironically. Just like 2 months ago, the person had gone to the embassy, had been posted there. And I promised him that I would take my grandchildren and would come on a visit. So I pray this day resolves very quickly, this Niger thing.
Amen. You alluded in the interview to how things have changed in the country, how no justice, no equity, no merit. Where do you place the blame? Is it us who are also, where are the elites, where are the ones who should have given guidance to the younger people we complain about?
I don't really want to say, it's just unfortunate that somehow things have gone this way. You've got to know someone before you get something. And so in all situations, it would seem to me like those that are already up, you and I that have the connection would continue to take from the system. I wish we could devise a way of saying, okay, for whatever is available, this percentage of it should go down compulsorily on merit. So that those that are lower down the ladder, whether economically, socially, whatever, can actually access those places. You can reserve a percentage of whatever is available and say, okay, because we are all Africans for now, we are all Nigerians, there's always this desire to help here and there. Okay, but it should not go beyond this percentage. I wish we could do that. But you now discover that people, you get a job if you know the person who is there. So you wonder, when does the average village person who has no one get this chance? So inevitably, the only people they will now cling on to are their political representatives. If they say there are vacancies in social establishment, and a member of the house or something or senator would get to so many slots and dash them out. So what if within his town or village there are people who are not of his political persuasions who are qualified? Can they get? That's the question. So truly I would pray for a day when we'll be able to say, no, this is the limit we can go. For everything that is available, please let us draw a line. A certain percentage of it can go on this contact thing, but let some of it be purely on merit. I think this is what happened in my days when I got the chance. Perhaps if it was in these days, I would never have gotten the chance to go to Queen Elizabeth School. But I went there. My father was relatively important in my own small community. But on the national scene, he wasn't anybody. Yet, I went and rubbed shoulders with the children of those who were everything in the north.
Yeah.
People in the premier's cabinet. Their children were our friends. One of my best friends till date is the daughter of an ex-minister of premier's time. We are still the best of friends. So only that environment brought us together. Does the child of somebody in my village now have such a chance? Does she have that hope that a situation would arise where she would sit in class with the daughter of a minister and even become friends for life? That's the tragedy.
Thank you, Hajiya Indo Muhammed, for Hajiya Indo Bakori. And I hope viewers, you have followed us in that conversation. And until we meet in another episode of this program, thank you and goodbye.